Hi, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas, and we both work for the University of Kentucky in the Forestry and Natural Resources Department. And you know, Billy, we always have a jam-packed show, and it looks like we're going to do it again.
Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We've got a really exciting video, of an elk capture and release, so that's going to be really great. In addition to that, we've got Jacob and Matt, who were part of the filming of that and starring in that, so they'll be available, maybe talk a little bit more about that. Then we have our ever popular tree of the week, another one of our oak species. I'll just save that and let Laurie introduce that, which oak that is. And then Dr. Ellen Crocker is going to be talking about something really kind of exciting, I think, in the forest health world. So I'm really looking forward to that. But we're really glad to have you all with us today. You can interact with us via the chat pod if you're on Zoom, and if you're joining us via Facebook Live, please use the comment section.
Definitely. So let's get started. So Matt, are you available? There he is.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Delay in the button push there.
It happens, right?
Hey, so Matt, this video is awesome, man.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this.
Sure. Yeah, so this is basically a synopsis of our winter elk capture that we've been doing the last 2 years as a project in collaboration with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, looking at cow survival and reproduction rates in eastern Kentucky.
All right. Sounds good. Well, let's watch that video, and then we can ask any questions later.
This is Matt Springer with the University of Kentucky Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. And today we're out here participating in some elk research where we're using a helicopter to capture adult elk that are going to be, for the most part, radio collared with GPS collars, as well as getting a full biological workup. Now, the reason we're using a helicopter is because of its efficiency. Someone is actually sitting in that chopper with the pilot with a net gun, and they will fly low to the elk, shoot the net over the elk get tripped up, and they drop down, hobble the elk, and bring them to this workup station where we process them, do things like draw blood, pull a tooth for aging, put the GPS collar on, as well as if it's an adult cow, they will receive a VIT transmitter to be part of our elk calf research project, where we'll come back when that cow gives birth to find that calf using that transmitter to locate the calf.
Put her in her bag or just ride it on her?
So one of the reasons we use helicopters is because their efficiency. They're very good at finding elk because of their high viewpoint looking over the forest. And they can access elk in areas and chase them into open areas, basically at a very slow rate, so that the elk don't get overexerted and high in temperature. So we want to basically slightly and lightly push them into the opens to be captured. We can target individuals like adults or juveniles in this fashion, which is very helpful for our research purposes and making the most out of our time. The crew that is here, there's about 35 individuals here helping aid this process, and we're able to catch about 60 to 80 elk in a 4 to 5 day period of time, which if we were using traditional methods like corral traps or clover traps, this effort could actually take 3 to 4 months. So we are monitoring a subset or a number of individuals of the elk population, specifically adult cows or females, but also their calves, to estimate their survival, but also their causes of mortality here in the landscape. And then that information is used by wildlife managers to inform what we call population models, to be able to figure out how many elk are on the landscape and how well they're doing, and what management activities that need to be made in order to keep the population healthy over long periods of time.
Once the elk is captured with the net gun, the capture crew in the helicopter drops down, hobbles the elk, and gets them in a sling attached to the helicopter, and they bring that elk to our processing unit. In that journey, the elk is actually not sedated, but only blindfolded to help keep its stress levels lower. This aids us in actually better assessing the animal's health, and also if that animal were to have a bad reaction to the drugs, though very unlikely, we would not be able to be sure of its health status when it arrived. So we do not give any sedation drugs until that elk is dropped on the trailer and initial inspection of that elk's health is assessed.
Well, Matt, that was an amazing video. Thank you so much for doing that. And, I was wondering, as questions start coming in, which I'm sure they're going to, is why is it important to manage elk and check them out and process them the way you did?
Sure, and so elk is a resource that our state has. It's from the hunting and tourism perspective, incredibly important that the population is managed accordingly to keep them kind of at that carrying capacity where they're all healthy animals, but also that there's not so many that they're causing damage issues with agriculture, car vehicle collisions, or forest restoration, regeneration. So we have to kind of keep tabs on their populations. As well as, as part of that and making sure that we have a healthy herd is we do some biological assessments, whether or not they're carrying certain diseases. The big one that we're obviously concerned about is chronic wasting disease, which we're still CWD free here in Kentucky, and hopefully can stay that way. But we're looking at parasite loads, other potential respiratory diseases, stress hormones. Dr. Casey, who's the wildlife vet for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, is there and working at every elk that lands on that pad and do a complete workup to make sure these are healthy animals and we have a healthy resource out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I was going to ask, those collars that were placed on them, how long are those? How long do they last, I guess? Or do y'all have to go back and take them off? Or what's that process? Or they just wear off? Or?
So they can just wear off the UV, especially the younger calf collars that kind of expand as they go. They're made of stretchy material that will wear out and fall off the animal as that neck gets bigger. The adults, they don't grow that much anymore, right? Just like us, only in the belly area. Then that's not where the GPS is. So those collars are. The battery is really what dictates how long they stay in, and most of the battery life is related to how often they're taking locations. I believe Fish and Wildlife has them take a location about every 23 hours. So that collar will be able to monitor that animal's survival for about 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
And how long have we always had elk in Kentucky, or did we bring them in, or how?
Traditionally, we had
history.
Traditionally we had the eastern elk in Kentucky, and unfortunately that subspecies went extinct with the settlement from European settlement. So these are actually Rocky Mountain elk that were brought in from several different states. Donated elk about 21 years ago now. And actually it's kind of funny because not in the video that we collected, but we did catch this year 2 of the original elk that were released from 21 years ago that were still alive and still having calves. So that gives you an idea how long they can live and be part of the reproductive framework of that population.
That was my next question. How long do they live? So
and they were from New Mexico and they were together still. So yeah, it was pretty crazy when they came in with the ear tags that telling us that that's where they're from. Mm-hmm. And I see we have a question from Chris. And what is the reporting process if a tagged elk is harvested? There is a phone number associated with that tag that's on the tag that lets you know what to do. You can also reach out to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources directly, and will put you in touch with the elk group that is responsible for taking all that biological data and keeping track of those tagged animals.
Now, are elk allowed to be?
We have the hunting season, and it's a pretty big event if you're a hunter, and it's all by draw every year. And they're getting ready, or they did just have. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar if they just had it or not. But it's an event held in Prestonsburg in May where they do a live drawing for all the tags, and there's usually about 700 tags drawn each year for access to hunt.
Okay.
Wow.
Oh, sounds great.
I know what an exciting video. That was really cool.
Yeah, there should be more to come too, because that was only the capture part. We have the elk calf capture here starting in the next month that we're going to try to put a video segment for a little bit later on this summer. And Jacob did an amazing job with that video. I have to give him all the credit because I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
I'm useless.
Now, was Jacob up in the helicopter with them?
No, that was a GoPro attachment.
Oh, okay. That was some cool footage. Good. Yeah. Great work, guys. Really.
Yeah, thank you very much to you both for doing that video.
Cool.
All right.
So now we've got an ever popular feature. Here we go. The tree of the week. And, Laurie's going to be featuring another oak. But now, Laurie, I didn't tell them which oak. So.
Yeah, and it's one they may not have heard or seen. While it is in Kentucky, it's one of those that's not super numerous like maybe our white oak or our northern red oak. So we have the shingle oak this week. I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the shingle oak. Shingle oak, Quercus imbricaria, is a stately tree of the red oak group. This group has willow-like or laurel-like leaves, and many consider it to be one of the most handsome of the oaks. It has an attractive branching pattern with a rounded canopy that casts a medium to deep shade during the summer months. It is a medium-sized tree that typically grows about 40 to 60 feet tall and 24 to 36 inches in diameter. It does reach its largest size in the Mississippi River Valley. It may be one of the best oaks, but it's not commonly used as an ornamental. Shingle oak has a relatively small range and is native to the central United States. It is found in Kentucky except parts of eastern half of the state and is most common in the Knobs region of the state. It is typically found growing in uplands with good drained soil, but is tolerant of various sites. However, best growth is in relatively moist soils on lower hillsides. It is relatively drought tolerant and tolerates urban conditions.
The leaves are deciduous, alternately arranged on the twig, and simple in form. They're about 3 to 7 inches long, and they're broadly lance-shaped, and the margins are unlobed, unlike most of the oaks, but they do have the bristle tip like the red oak group. The leaves resemble laurel leaves and are a good characteristic to distinguish from other oaks. They are somewhat leathery, shiny dark green above and lighter below, and can be somewhat fuzzy on the underside. Fall color is yellowish brown to a russet red, and some leaves may persist through the winter. Shingle oak is monoecious, which means the tree has both male and female flowers. The male flowers are on slender yellow catkins, and the female flowers are on short spikes. The flowers bloom as the leaves are about half grown, and the flowers are wind pollinated. The fruit is a smallish acorn that's about 5/8 of an inch long with a thin cap that covers almost half of the nut. Acorns are solitary or in pairs, and the acorns mature in the fall of the second year after the flowers have been pollinated. The acorns tend to be bitter and germinate the following spring, and they are disseminated by wind, gravity, and wildlife. The bark is gray-brown and quite hard. It has broad, irregular ridges and very shallow furrows. The wood is very strong and kind of a pale reddish brown. It's similar to the other red oaks. Oaks in general are important for wildlife, and shingle oak is no different. The tree provides nesting sites and good cover for birds and mammals late into the season, since oak's leaves typically persist longer than their other plant associates. The acorns are an important food source for wild turkey, blue jays, red-headed and red-bellied woodpeckers, nuthatches, grackles, raccoons, white-tailed deer, and squirrels. The acorns of the red oak group are especially important in the winter because acorns from the white oak group germinate right after they drop in the fall and are not available throughout the winter months. The national champion shingle oak as of 2021 is in Jefferson County, Kentucky. It's 190 inches in circumference, 115 feet tall, with a 125-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest's National Champion Trees, or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about shingle oak. Early settlers in North America used this tree to make shingles, leading to the common name shingle oak. Another common name is laurel oak due to the resemblance of the leaves. Quercus is the Latin name for the oak, and Imbricaria, which is the species name, is derived from the Latin word imbricatus, which means covered with overlapping scales or plates. I hope you enjoyed learning about this interesting oak and get the chance to get out into your woodland, local park, or neighborhood and see the shingle oak.
You know, Lori, I don't think I would have said that was an oak.
I know,
I'm
it doesn't
used to
look like
that.
I remember learning it in dendrology. We actually saw it at Pilot Knob in the knobs, and we were like, no way, this isn't, what is this? And it's an oak. Yeah. So, and we have another one. We've got our willow oak that also has those lance shaped leaves as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
How many red oaks do we have in Kentucky?
Well, we've got about 20 different kinds of oaks, and 13 of those are red oaks and 7 of those are white oaks. So, and this is not one of the most numerous ones, obviously. And it is one of those, obviously it is a street. You can use it as a street tree because we saw our national champion is in someone's front yard, but it's not an easy one to find. As of the last look that I had on Kentucky Division of Forestry seedlings, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, they did not sell shingle oak. And I know Missouri Department of Conservation, who also has sells seedlings, they do not sell it as well. So obviously people can still find it maybe at a specialty nursery, but it's not something that's super readily available. If you want it, you're going to need to look for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if they made shingles from it, hence the name, and then you put that in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the name comes from. And I'm sure like in period or doing restoration of something period, you may use shingle oak for that, but I don't think it's probably, we don't do a lot of our shingles from wood except for like on old cabins and whatnot. So
right.
It's pretty cool, Laurie. We've got a number of species that are national champions here in Kentucky.
Yep.
You know, having seen you do this for over a year now with all of these species, there's quite a few.
I know, I was going to say I ought to take a look. I don't ever just look in general at what are the national champions in Kentucky, but just take a look, and you can actually do that by just visiting the Kentucky Division of Forestry champion trees, and type in whatever species you're looking for, and they have a big banner on it if it's a national champion, so that lets you know right away. So, but yeah, we have many of them here.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love the series, Laurie. Learn something new every time.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Oh, cool. Hey, we got something really exciting,
I know, right?
the forest health world. A lot of times we hear about, bad stuff
Bad
coming
stuff.
to take over our woods, but Ellen is here with a very cheerful message, I believe. So
Yeah, hopefully, and to get some help too. I've got a project and I'd really love to hear from you all.
excellent. So we've got a nice little video. Ellen, do you want to say anything before I play it?
No, but I am looking for people to have their eyes on the ground for this new disease. Most of the diseases I talk about are bad, right? Diseases of trees that we don't want. And this is something that maybe is a little bit more positive when we can talk some about that later.
All right.
Positive disease. All right, let's get going with that video.
Hi, I'm Ellen Crocker, and I need your help. I have a new citizen science project, and I'm looking for people just like you to report the locations of honeysuckle leaf blight, which is a disease of bush honeysuckle and other honeysuckles. I'm interested in this disease because I'd like to have better ways to control invasive bush honeysuckle and Japanese honeysuckle, which is the vine species of invasive honeysuckle that we have in our area. And while this disease right now isn't causing a ton of damage, in some areas, it seems to be associated with a decline over time of these honeysuckle. So I want to learn, where is the disease, just how much disease does it cause, and is there any way we could weaponize this disease as a biological control for these invasive species? So if you're not familiar with bush honeysuckle, it's an invasive shrub that can grow almost like a tree, like a small tree, but more often you'll see it in your forest understories, along the sides of roads, even people's backyards. It was really popular as an ornamental plant. It was used for erosion control and other things, but it doesn't stay put. So even though it might start there, birds will eat those berries and move them to other locations. So while you might have a honeysuckle in your yard and you've had it for years and it hasn't really spread, those berries are still being carried by birds and being kind of scattered throughout forests and old field sites, and really taking those over, forming this dense layer that a lot of native plants can't really compete with. It's going to shade them out and produce such a dense layer that nothing else is going to be there. And so that's why bush honeysuckle is a problem, because it decreases the diversity of those areas and it reduces the regeneration of the native species we want to be seeing. So what does honeysuckle leaf blight look like? You can see that little patches of dead tissue, maybe some leaf distortion and curling in. You can see other leaf problems, but I think this really stands out, and there's a lot of it. We don't have any shortage of it in the central Kentucky area, but what I really would like you to do is, if you see bush honeysuckle with these symptoms, I want you to get out your smartphone and the app iNaturalist and report that as honeysuckle leaf blight on iNaturalist. We've got a project going, and you can join that project to get updates on what we're doing. You can also see where else in the world are people finding honeysuckle leaf blight. So if you see any symptoms that look like these, please submit them on the app iNaturalist, and that way I'll be able to see them and kind of get an idea of where it is and what kind of damage it's causing. So a big thanks to all of you for watching today, and I hope that you will get out there in the next few weeks as we start to see some of these symptoms and report them to me. Let me know what you're seeing and kind of help advance our fight against bush honeysuckle and other invasive plants.
Ellen, thank you so much for that video. And do you mean there's actually something out there that might help us with bush honeysuckle?
Yeah, well, that's the hope, right? And I say hope because right now we don't really know. This is a disease that it's thought to be native to North America. It's a pathogen, a fungal pathogen that infects honeysuckles, and we've known about it for a long time. In fact, someone wrote their PhD dissertation on it in the 40s, the 1940s. So it's nothing new per se. but it does seem to be increasing and increasing on the invasive honeysuckle. So there are native honeysuckles out there, and that's one of the things that we want to test with this project is, does this disease impact them as well? And if so, how much? Because we don't want to hurt those natives. But it does seem to really be increasing on the invasive honeysuckles, in particular the bush honeysuckle that we have a ton of in our area. And I don't know if you've seen it before, but just these past few years, I think it's become much more obvious on those leaves, those kind of dead patches, those kind of crumpled leaves on honeysuckle that, make me wonder, is this something that's getting worse? Has maybe this fungus found better ways to infect bush honeysuckle because there's so much of it? Or are maybe our conditions here, changing in ways that promote this fungus? We've had a lot of wet years, so maybe that's kind of increasing the ability of this fungus to infect bush honeysuckle, and we really don't know. We know it's been here for a while. This is not bringing something new in. We know that it causes disease on bush honeysuckle, but could it maybe be used as part of an integrated management strategy to control bush honeysuckle over time? That's what I'm really interested in, because, invasive plants are a pain, and managing them is a pain because it's not once and done. You can get rid of all of your honeysuckle one year, and if you wait 5 years, it'll be back, right? And so thinking about long term, how can our ecosystems become more resilient for these invasives? You would expect that over time, invasive plants would accumulate and acquire more pathogens because they have them in their home range, their ancestral range. They leave them behind when they come here, and they're able to benefit because they don't have that disease pressure. All the native plants have to deal with that, but they don't. So over time, you'd expect these invasives to maybe find some new enemies, right? Some new fungi that are able to attack them. And so I hope that that's what we're seeing here with bush honeysuckle, that maybe over time, it's going to be part of, making it less dominant. We might never get rid of bush honeysuckle, but hopefully, our native species will have more of a chance. It'll be less of a sea of bush honeysuckle and more, some plants here or there, but not as damaging as it is for our systems right now. And I would say that we've got, this has been here for a while. We've known about it for a long time. And there's no shortage of honeysuckle leaf blight. If you go out anywhere in northern Kentucky, central Kentucky, you will definitely find some. So report that with iNaturalist. But even if you're visiting or you're watching from, further away locations, I heard from somebody that the symptoms were out right now in Cincinnati, but also in Missouri. So I've already been hearing from people about this. And no matter where you are, if you've got bush honeysuckle and you see these symptoms, report them on iNaturalist, and that way I can check them out and kind of contribute to that map of where do we see this? Where might it be something that could suppress honeysuckle a little bit into the future?
So I'm assuming it doesn't just kill it off then.
Well, no, it doesn't. And if it did, we'd have a lot of dead honeysuckle, because you can go out to the parks around here and
Because we've got a lot of honeysuckle.
We do. But one of my collaborators on this project is Rick Boyce at Northern Kentucky University, and he's been researching honeysuckle for a long time. He's on the faculty there and has been seeing over time in sites that have a lot of this disease, there's decline of those honeysuckle bushes over time, which to me is really encouraging. Now, it could just be something about that site. It could, just be unique to that location, but maybe this is something that could be more broadly applicable. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to look into with this project is, in addition to kind of where is it, which is where we're asking for that citizen science help, how damaging is that pathogen, that fungus that causes it to bush honeysuckle, to other invasive honeysuckles like the Japanese vine honeysuckle, to our native honeysuckles? Is this something that, could be a part of a management strategy going forward? So over the next few years, we're going to explore that a little bit more. But as with all invasives, invasive plant management is a pain. So we're really just looking to add tools to the toolbox of woodland owners and managers to better control these invasives.
Ellen, that's really exciting news. For some of us who have been trying to fight this pest for a long time, to hear that there may be some hope down the road is exciting.
And there's hope right now, in that if you've got woods and you've got bush honeysuckle in your woodland, it can feel insurmountable because it's this dense sea. It can be really frustrating because when you've got that dense thicket of bush honeysuckle, you don't get the native wildflowers you want. You don't get the regeneration of tree species that you want. You just get a sea of bush honeysuckle, which is why it's considered invasive and not just a non-native species that we don't like. For it to be invasive, it's not native to here, but it also has some really big negative impact ecologically, environmentally, and that's what bush honeysuckle is doing. It's reducing that diversity. But even right now, if you've got honeysuckle in your woods, you can manage it, and you can have a huge impact. So that looks differently depending on where you are and what how much honeysuckle you have. If you just have a few small plants, you can probably pull them out of the ground, especially if it's after rain and the ground's pretty moist. You can even buy these little devices, weed wrenches, or similar types of things that'll help you pop it out of the ground a little bit more easily. And if you can get the whole root system, you're set. But once you get into some of those bigger plants, it's harder to do that because even if you could get the whole root system, it's really tough. And you're disturbing that site a lot, which of course disturbance is a great entry point for future invasives. So if you've got bigger plants, you want to be thinking about how do you minimize the disturbance there. So something like maybe cutting the stem and putting herbicide on that to kill the root system. And that's really important because if you're not killing that root system, it's just going to sprout back up twice as bad the next year. It won't really do a lot just to cut the above ground portion. Now you could do that year after year after year, and you'd probably see an impact, but it's a lot less site disturbance to do something like that cut stump herbicide approach. And that really targets your herbicide right to that bush honeysuckle and not to all the native plants that you want to see thrive there. Another thing that people will do to kind of in their management practices to focus on bush honeysuckle is to apply that herbicide during a time window when nothing else has leaves. So bush honeysuckle is one of the first things to leaf out in the spring and the last to lose its leaves in the fall. So if you wait until late fall when everything else has lost its leaves, but bush honeysuckle still has its on, that can be a great time to use herbicide because you're less likely to kind of have those non-target damages to the plants you want to keep. So even right now, there's a lot that landowners, whether it's in your backyard or in the woods, you can do to control honeysuckle. But I think, having more tools, more sustainable tools in that toolbox over time to kind of keep honeysuckle at bay will be really valuable.
Yeah.
I see a question in the chat. Is it only affecting honeysuckle or like other diseases? Does it impact other hosts? Really, it's pretty limited to honeysuckle, but there are different honeysuckle that are out there. There's native, there's non-native, and there has been, fortunately, a fair amount of work done on this, looking at the host range, a very extensive examination of the host range of this pathogen. But that was all done in the 1940s. So one of the things that we're hoping to do is to repeat some of that to see, is that still the case? Make sure it doesn't really impact other species. Although it's all around. So if it is impacting other species, you know about it. And we've been working with the UK plant diagnostic labs for this, and they have been amazing resources. If you're not familiar with the plant diagnostic lab, there are 2 state plant diagnostics labs, one in Lexington and one in Princeton, Kentucky. And, they can identify what's causing disease on anything from a tree to my bush honeysuckle to agricultural horticultural and garden crops. And they are fantastic resources. So if you've got some issues, the best way to get in touch with them would be actually to work with your county extension office. They might know what it is and not need to send it to the lab because they've seen these samples before. But if they don't, that's a great resource that they could rely on, and it's free. So
Yeah, no doubt. Now, Ellen, are there any other examples of some species, invasive species, that maybe are starting to show some weaknesses that maybe we didn't think about before, or any other?
yeah. Yeah, well, again, this is something that I mentioned, like the theory behind it. Like theoretically, over time, the longer these invasive plants have been there, maybe they'll be a little bit less invasive, right? They'll be a little bit less able to produce these dense stands because they'll have things that keep them in check. And so we've seen this with some others, but I think it remains to be seen if it will decrease their ability to thrive enough that they won't be invasive anymore. But people have seen this with other invasive plants as well, that the longer they're there, the kind of worse they do. And they might still do well, but not forming those dense stands. And so people recently, there's some research out of Cornell University having to do with garlic mustard, that maybe in some of the sites they worked with, garlic mustard wasn't really driving some of the negative impacts. It was some other invasive species. And that the longer garlic mustard was there, the worse those populations did over time. So the idea being that there's some kind of interaction with soil microbial communities that over time, garlic mustard, which is an invasive herbaceous species that will kind of take over understories and be really, really dense, maybe it will do more poorly over time. There's also recently been a native pathogen that's been found to infect tree of heaven, which is an invasive tree, a verticillium wilt that will actually kill tree of heaven. Now they found it in many of our neighboring states, but if anybody sees tree of heaven dying, I would love to know about it, like large patch somewhere, to see if it might have that disease, because that's one that in West Virginia and some other states, I think Virginia as well, they've been testing it out as a biological control. So could you spray this on tree of heaven and kill tree of heaven that way as well? And that's just a native pathogen that they've found infecting tree of heaven. Now, tree of heaven is still a problem and it's still an invasive issue. So just because that's happening doesn't necessarily mean that it's all over for tree of heaven. But I do think it's exciting to see those new tools popping up, new tools in the toolbox for management over time.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I think you give all of us who have been trying to fight invasive plants some additional hope that, down the road, things, we're buying time, right? We're protecting these sites as long as we can, and down the road, there may be additional help on the way. So, Ellen, great work. You and the Forest Health Lab here at UK are doing some awesome work. And I encourage everybody, use iNaturalist and send in samples of that honeysuckle leaf blight.
Yeah, this year we just want you to observe them on iNaturalist. But if you do that and you've got good samples, I can't promise that I won't reach out to you again in the future and be like, hey, could you bring me one of those? This year we just want to know where they are. And
yeah, just the photos for now.
Just the photos for now, and it's super easy to do on iNaturalist. If you haven't used iNaturalist before, you're in for a treat because it's a fantastic identification tool as well as a way to connect you to citizen scientists. But I might loop you in the future if you take some really good photos. So appreciate it and hope everyone gets out there and snap some photos of honeysuckle leaf blight.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Ellen, very much.
Ellen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Renee covered a lot of ground today, right?
We did, literally.
We got to fly in a helicopter and and learn about some hopeful things with forest health issues. And
right, normally we're just telling everybody, well, we've got this new thing, at least now maybe there's some hope out there about something that might actually get rid of bush honeysuckle
down the road. Yeah, and then we learned about a great new species that maybe some of you all may not be familiar with, the shingle oak. So again, thank you all so much for being with us each week. You can let us know how we're doing. We have a little survey link on fromthewoodstoday.com. You can also let us know if you'd like to see future show ideals or topics, or if you've seen anything interesting in your woods. Let us know. You can upload a photo there as well.
Yep. And remember, any episode that we have, and if you just like, ooh, I really want to see that elk video again, you can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and watch all of our episodes on there. They're posted usually within a week after the show date. And so, you know, we're pretty much done for today. So we greatly appreciate it because we couldn't do this without you all joining us every week. And so make sure you tune in next Wednesday at 11 o'clock.
See you next week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.